alias Stu Woodward, alias Stu Sherpa. And Stu, you have organized many great, adventurous, affordable trips for the cheap. And Stu, you are indeed a jolly good leader that nobody can deny. I first met Stu through Ski Club about in '73. At that time, he was really changing the nature of the club. Up to that time, it had been more or less a one-dimensional downhill ski club, and he changed it into a year-round, multi-sport, adventure, social club, and did a very good job of it.
Yes.
I remember at that time, I think I first met Stu. He had organized a volleyball league that met for Ski Club every Wednesday night at Scott Carpenter Pool, and he'd show up with 3 nets and balls, stake them out. We had advanced, beginners, and intermediate volleyball games on Wednesday evening, and then sometimes partied afterwards. He also was canoeing, leading trips, canoeing raging rivers and spelunking wild caves, climbing 14ers, and so forth and so on. Stu more or less created the post of non-downhill outdoor activity as a board member, and has occupied that position for most of the past nearly 40 years. And I would disagree a little bit with Eliese that Stu has led at least 1,000 ski activities, if you count the volleyball games, which went on for about 7 months of the year, every week. He did that for 20, 25 years. That's several hundred events right there. Yeah. Not to mention some day trips, and then probably did about 200 weekend or overnight trips at least.
Board with that, and I don't remember that much about the board meetings, but I remember that I would give a report about the social things, functions that would be going on, and I would usually come after Stu in the meeting, and I remember, boy, that man really has a lot to say. Then I remember, you know, chronologically, I'm not too good at this, but going on a trip to Diamond Lake. One summer, it was a backpack. We were going up to Diamond Lake on a backpack. And Stu had come along. He was not going to be on the backpack overnight. He was in training to go on a trip to Nepal. So he offered to carry my backpack if I would carry his day pack. Well, I mean, you know, it was not a hard decision to make. So then, along the way, we were talking. Stuart was married at this time, and after having been through a divorce, I was absolutely not looking for a married man. So I remember during the hike, when we were hiking up to Diamond Lake, mostly our topic of conversation was about the book that his wife was writing. So anyway, I thought that was very nice, and I thought that he was a nice man, and I thought, well, maybe someday I will meet a man like him to share my life with. And then after that, it was a few years later, like I say, I can't remember the dates of all these, but I heard that Stuart was getting a divorce. And I thought, oh, you know, but before I knew it, he was seeing someone else. So you're just on a trip. It was a cross-country ski trip to Redstone, where we stayed at the Redstone Inn. And I remember it will be 17 years this March, because Stuart was telling me about his 2 granddaughters who had just been born that month, and they're going to be 17 this year. So that's how I can remember years. I remember years by grandchildren. That's how I sort the events of my life. So I went on that trip to Redstone, and I remember talking to Stuart at the happy hour, and we were talking. He was telling me that he was staying at the Redstone Inn. He was staying in this attic room, and he was staying there by himself, and he was telling me about what a nice room he had, and that I should come up and visit him. So I went up later that night and knocked on his door, and he opened it, but I think he was surprised when I had Sarah Hill with me. Because Sarah and I had come to the Redstone trip together. But anyway, we did communicate after that trip, and then we started seeing each other after that Redstone trip. So that was 17 years. We will have a drawing for the first copy, when this is published, of Stu's best jokes. So I'm sure that will be incentive for many people to come to the party with one of the first copy of Stu's best jokes.
So maybe it's a little both, I don't know. My facts may be a little distorted, but my first vague memory of Stu was a trip to his backyard, which I think was in Arvada, and he was with another woman. And that's all I know about that. Nancy alluded to that already, and most of us guys back then were with another woman. One of my first winter trips was Stu, or maybe it was a little far along because Sandy was with me. But we went to Grand Mesa on a cross-country skiing trip and stayed in the Mesa Lakes modern cabins. Now I use the term modern loosely.
But they were affordable.
You're stealing my thunder. Sandy and I shared a drafty, elongated cabin that had a bed on one end and a curtain, and another bed in the living room, and then a leaky, moldy shower on the other end, and in between there was a bevy of mice that entertained all night. But it was cheap. One of my first summer trips, again, memories vague because it's well back there. I'm pretty sure Stu led it, and it was car camping. And it might have been north of Rifle, and we drove past a fish hatchery, and below it was a pond. So we went on up and set up camp, and I came back down to the pond, and I hooked the biggest fish I've ever hooked in Colorado. And I was trying to land that dude, and I got in the water up to my waist trying to land it. I had it on the bank, was flopping around, and flipped the hook, and it jumped back in the water. I came back grumpy, and it spoiled my whole weekend. That was my first trip with Stu. I want to note that Stu has never led a fishing trip. A few years ago, canoeing the Green, we had a punishing, grueling, dehydrating 22-mile day on slow water because we couldn't find an island to camp on. Our leader couldn't find an island. And we were paddling so hard, there was no time to fish. Of the many canoe trips I've taken with Stu, we did many on the Gunnison. And it was just last year, I guess, that Stu hiked us up this dry, tongue-parching canyon to these pitiful petroglyphs. And we were attacked by people eating gnats. And they got in our hair, and they got in our food. I guess it was payback because the gnats ate us and we ate the gnats. But 90 bites, I thought I had poison ivy, and there was no time to fish. We all remember the Canyonlands trips, the many Moab camping trips. Year after year, all those memories of tents full of sand, trying to sleep in a pool of sweat after an infinite death march through a slot canyon, a body winching Jeep ride in 120-degree heat, always to see more petroglyphs. The man is obsessed with petroglyphs. And there was no water, no fish at all. Now, Stu has led trips to greener places with clear, cool water. I've only done one trip to the Niobrara with him, but I remember it well. Stu advertised the 100 waterfalls on the river. I drove my old van with the canoe on top, and I was steered by a vehicle jerking headwind all the way 400 miles across the sand hills in Nebraska. We got to this pretty but piddling little river. One indeed was fed by 100 waterfalls, 2 of which were over 3 feet high. When I get that backwards, 3 of which were over 2 feet high. We did canoe over one 2-foot waterfall, and that's where Stu dumped Nancy in the river. And this was followed by a van-jerking headwind all the way south across the headwinds in the sandhills in Nebraska to get back home. And there was no time to fish. So you get the picture. The question is, why would we follow this guy anywhere? I had to scratch my head a little while. I came up with a few things. Out of those parched Moab camping trips came my favorite desert drink, Scotch and electrolytes. It handles both the pain and the dehydration. That trip down the Green was saved by the most spectacular 4th of July ever at the confluence, thanks to the illegal fireworks that Ted Hine brought and illegally exploded them in the national park, echoing off the canyon walls. Powell's expedition must have been envious. On a simpler note, Stu now leads many trips that include showers and bathrooms. And it does maximize the bang for the buck. As Ross said, Stu is infinitely patient, and that is true compliment to Stu. When Stu and I ski together, we do it well because we both become slower than the pack. And Stu and I bunk well together because I snore and he unplugs his hearing aid. And if Stu were to write a book, or maybe Nancy will, of his Stuisms, who of us wouldn't buy it? So overall, in the end, it's has been all about Stu bringing us together for the camaraderie, the sing-alongs on New Year's Eve and many other parties. It's been about the adventure, all the exploration, the fresh air, the splendid outdoors, the supreme isolation, and places we probably would never have gone to if Stu hadn't taken the effort to lead us. So Stu, may you and old Blue always float. And may your snow always be powder. And should you go to the happy hunting ground before some of us, for the ride of your afterlife, we survivors of your trips are going to put your ashes and a fishing pole in old Blue and float you down Cataract Canyon.
Probably one of the newer members. I mean, I haven't been here for 40 years, but I have been here 10. And I had, Flatirons is one of the first groups I joined when I came to Boulder 10 years ago from the East Coast. And I hadn't been here very long when the present president encouraged new people to always go on a trip. And I have to say, I wasn't impressed with the meeting place, because it used to be the pub over in Wilderness where you were squashed like sardines, so you couldn't move and you couldn't interact with anybody. So, but I have some persistence, so I thought, well, I'll just play this out. The president thing, as I said, encouraged us to join a group. So I went to the Fraser, first trip to Fraser in January. Well, it just so happened that, I don't even remember who the leader was, but Stu was there, and 7 other people who were going to Nepal. Now you have to understand, I've just been here for 6 months at that point. And so they said to me, well, why don't you come with us? So I did ask Stu a lot of questions about food, you know, do you think I was able to do it, da-da-da-da-da-da. So I ended up going to Nepal in 2002, almost a year after I had arrived. So Stu took us on some training hikes, and that was all well and good. But we get to Bangkok, and you have to understand, I don't know Stu's reputation yet. So we went to Bangkok, and Stu is telling us he's going to take us to this fabulous, fabulous restaurant where we could get any cuisine from around the world. And I thought, well, that sounded pretty good, because I had not been to the East at all. So we're very excited, and we get all ready to go to this wonderful place of cuisine around the world. And Stu leads us to the food court of a shopping center. Affordable. Yes, it was affordable. So we decided, knowing Stu, and others much better than I, that probably he had never been to a shopping mall and had never been to a food court, so we thought that was very, very special. Well, the group rebelled, and they said, we are not eating at a food court in Bangkok. So we did find another restaurant, and he very nicely conceded to join us. So that was my first experience with Stu of affordable places. But it was the most magnificent experience I had ever had. So thanks to Stu, I never would have experienced Nepal had it not been for Stu.
Now you've let him.
And for those that you don't know, I have filled Stu's retired position as group leader in Nepal. So I've just come on my off my 9th trip since then. So Stu, thank you.
Why I'm up here tonight, I've known Stu now for 15 years. And one of the things that I know about he and I is that we are very similar in a lot of very weird reasons, I think. I'm not sure when you first learned to ski. I learned to ski in 1956. Came out here to Colorado and learned how to ski. I left Colorado for several years after 1959, graduating from college, and realized my mistake, and in 1966, I moved back, and I've been here, except for a little sojourn to Maui for 9 years, but then I retired and came back here, and I don't know hardly anybody who has lived in Colorado for any period of time, who has left Colorado and not come back. So I don't know about you guys, but it's kind of an interesting thing. Stu is an amazing guy to be able to remember all of these places that he takes people every year. And Nancy and I have been on trips with him, and we really enjoy his leadership, and it's really been great. But the remarkable thing is that he and I are both aerospace engineers. Well, he claims to be an aerospace engineer. He's actually a rocket scientist.
He's a baker.
A baker. I am an aerospace engineer, and I was for 38 years. Wonderful thing to get to do, and I claim that I'm a rocket scientist. Because there's nothing in the world better than to, when one of these subjects comes up, they can't fix it, and you say, oh, well, that's not rocket science, I can certainly take care of that, so I do. But to me, the most remarkable thing about Stu and I is that we have both, in our second lives, married Nancys. And let me tell you, that is an experience, if none of you have ever done that. If you have not married a Nancy, you know, you haven't, you haven't lived. And I think it's so wonderful that we both have these wonderful Nancys that we live with, and it's worked out well for me, and it's worked out very well for Stu. And so congratulations, Stu, on taking care of the ski club with all of the wonderful things you've done for us over the years. And congratulations on having married a Nancy.
I felt really, really good. And the not hearing thing was a really good thing because we were sharing a tent, and I tend to be up and down in the night, so I didn't bother him. And but it was extremely hot. I don't know, it wasn't the same one that was referred to, but it's the only time I've ever come close to heat exhaustion. And a couple of guys in here suggested I be thrown in the water or throw some water on me, and then I almost had hypothermia. So at 4 o'clock in the morning when I was taking an antihistamine, it didn't bother Stu.
Rose, hut trip, and the canoe trip. And I was amazed that in the course of, I think, less than 14 days, Stu did 2 hut trips and the canoe trip, and I was just going, oh wait, how many years older is he than me? And I'm complaining about this, and he's just still going strong. There's something wrong with me if I can't keep up with this. But on the canoe trip, you know, we all went from Moab down to the confluence on the Colorado. And we didn't have to get down to the confluence on this trip because the outfitters were going to send a jet boat down to pick us up, and since we were on the Colorado, they would have to come by us. And we could have stopped any place we wanted to, but we kept pushing and got down to the confluence. Well, when the young outfitters, these young guys, came down to pick us up on, what, the start of the 4th day, I think it was, after they got us all loaded up, they said that they really didn't expect to have found us clear down at the confluence. They thought that we would surely quit before that because they looked at, you know, all of these old people. I'm assuming that since these guys, if they were 25, I'd be surprised. And the first answer out of everyone's mouth, almost simultaneously, was, they don't know our leader. You know, that our leader was just kept us going down there, so that will always be a fond memory for me. So Stu, why don't you come up here a minute? Yeah. This is a certificate that we made for you that we want you to have, and you're welcome to open it at this point in time.
It's not Christmas Eve?
Santa came early.
Oh, okay. We members of the Flatiron Ski Club, in appreciation for your years of providing adventure, puns and leadership, give a very deep felt thank you to Stuart Woodward, FSE Activities Chairman, December 2000. Thank you very much.
Oh, there's probably an app for that. But since, you know, people in this group, a lot of us don't have a clue as to what an app is, including me, that didn't get anywhere, but everybody sat around and got to thinking. They said, someone from Texas, someone from Texas. Oh, there's a song for that. And so we're going to do that song for you tonight. Would the Club Crooners vocal group please come up and join?
How we doing over here? Are we ready? Are we ready to head them out and move them? Head them up, move them out?
Yeah.
Well, Stu's a long, tall Texan. He came to Colorado to go to school. Well, Stu's a long, tall Texan. He came to Colorado to go to school. Well, people look at him and say, oh, Stu, did you go to school? Well, Stu's a long, tall Texan. He played with rockets to earn his pay. Well, Stu's a long, tall Texan. He played with rockets to earn his pay. Well, people look at him and say, oh, Stu, did you earn your pay? Well, Stu's a long, tall Texan. He likes to lead the way. He came from Texas just to lead the way. Well, Stu's a long, tall Texan. He likes to lead the way. He came from Texas just to lead the way. Well, people look at him and say, oh, Stu, did you lead the way?
Thank you all who participated. That was just wonderful. You all did a superb job.
It was good they were singing instead of me.